各位观众朋友们，大家好，欢迎收看 JxJ 论坛，由我以及我们的好朋友 Jim Noteware 为我们一起讨论这个礼拜的时事。Jim,
hello, Jimmy. Hello, Jim.
Right. Very somber times. Today's breaking news: we are praying for the families of the 10 Marines that were killed in action in Afghanistan at the airport. And they're confirmed now by the Pentagon. 20 troops were wounded and 10 is in critical condition. I'm sorry, I stand corrected. 13 U.S. soldiers are now believed killed. I'm at a loss for words, Jim. Where does the buck stop? What happened? The blaming, the bipartisan, it has to stop. It is about who's in charge, who's in the White House, what strategy, how do you protect American lives? Mm-hmm. Starting from here on out. I am very, very saddened by the deterioration of our command. Could you tell us what do you see? What is going on?
Well, I'm not sure that I know any better than anybody that is reporting on this and offering their opinions. I thought we should, if not get out of Afghanistan a long time ago. I'll take care of a long time ago. But I must admit, since I've heard what's going on there in the last 2 weeks, I've changed my position slightly. I think we should have stayed at the level of 2,500 troops, not to continue to nation build there, but to manage our intelligence gathering and to make damn sure that terrorism no longer has a base in Afghanistan. And in that process, we could have continued to assert our leadership and our protection over this, and gotten the 80 or 100,000 Afghans that need to get out, kept the Air Force base, and kept the munitions and all of that from falling into the wrong hands, and protected everybody that was there. There's a very interesting open secret. In the last 18 months, there was no American casualty in Afghanistan. In other words, we were down to basically an intelligence-keeping force. And I would argue that given proximity to Iran and Pakistan, that was critically important. Okay, so that's Jim Noteware's view. Now, my observation, I think Joe Biden read the political tea leaves in the United States and said, we need to get out. And he closed the book. And he basically let everything go. And I think there's two dimensions to this, Jimmy. The first dimension is it's an absolute disaster in every way imaginable. We can go on to the loss of life. We can go on to the loss of American prestige, armaments, money, and to say nothing of the loss of the lives of our servicemen and our treasurer over the last 20 years. What have they fought for? It's beyond belief. But the second thing may be even more important. This is an indication of Mr. Biden and his administration's inability to do almost anything. When you look around, the failures of his administration are just mounting every day. The southern border is one that comes to mind. The supply chain constraints and the inflation that's going on are another. The debt that is spiraling out of control, in part because of Mr. Biden's followers' policy decisions to create dependency on the government and to provide all kinds of socialistic propping up, and to undo capitalism, to undermining the oil and gas and energy industries. It just goes on and on and on. And I saw an interview yesterday with a man named Eric Prince. Eric Prince was the founder of Blackwater, which was the protection organization, the mercenaries protection. And one of the things he said was very, very interesting. He said, the reason that the US dollar continues to be the world's reserve currency is because the US economy is backed up by the US military. And I never quite thought of it that way. I've always looked at monetary policy for what it is, monetary policy. But he was absolutely right that without a strong defense, you don't have an ability to protect your economy and the rest of the world's economy. So, and then you go further and to say, what have we been doing with our economy recently? And this is not just in the Biden administration, but it goes back to the last several administrations. We have been living far beyond our means at a gradually increasing rate. In other words, we've been borrowing and borrowing and borrowing. A lot of that borrowing is because our own citizens lend the government money, but a lot of it is because foreigners, including most especially the Chinese, continue to buy our debt. And that puts us in a very, very precarious position, militarily and economically in so many ways. Where is this going to end? I don't know, but I don't think it's beyond speculation that Mr. Biden will not last in office very much longer. I think across the political spectrum, the United States has never been through something like this. I remember the fall of Saigon. That's been used as another example, but I have never seen calamity this significant when the stakes are so high. When the U.S. Left Saigon, it was pretty much an isolated incident. There were not a lot of other foreign dangers going on. A few years later, obviously, the Iran takeover of our embassy happened, but not immediately in 1975. Today, the whole world is at risk, particularly throughout Asia. We know that, and particularly throughout the Middle East. So the House of Cards is very, very vulnerable right now. And I'm not saying that anything that most every American doesn't agree with right now. I'm just giving you a very quick summary. And it's analytical. It's analytical, but it's also emotional, and you can't separate the two.
It is. I'm very saddened. The decay that started within did not begin now. It began decades ago, and it led us here. A lot of our adversaries, our foreign national, are calling this the beginning of the end for this great nation. Mm-hmm. I agree with you that not just turning our backs on our allies, the mistake in Syria, the mistake in Afghanistan, the continuous mistake that is easily preventable. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to go back and talk about what the previous administration did. Why did they sign the accord on May 1st? Or what we could quote what former President Trump said, that, oh, we left Biden in a box. You know, we left him this to let him deal with it. There's no point anymore. Even if he did, so what? You're the president now. You're in charge. And
excuse me, I want to amplify your point. You, Mr. Biden, ran for the office based upon the promise that you were going to manage things better than Mr. Trump, and you had a perfect lead time knowing what was coming. You knew what you were taking over. And if you did, if you didn't, shame on you for not doing your due diligence. But I'm very, very concerned that the Afghanistan example is just one of a number of failures, because there's literally a total vacancy at the top. And it's not just Mr. Biden personally, it's everything else. And I've had any number of conversations to say, Well, what happens if Mr. Biden leaves office? Then you get Kamala Harris. Can you possibly imagine that scenario? So the cynic in me says Kamala Harris is Mr. Biden's best insurance policy that he won't be impeached or thrown out. Okay. But yet, look, the very republic is at stake here. We can stand on all kinds of ceremonial processes, etc. But there's going to come a time when things are so bad that we need to make changes. This is what led to Jimmy Carter's defeat from Ronald Reagan. But this is much more immediate and much more abrupt than Carter was on a long slide. Mr. Biden is in a power dive.
It's devastating because usually there's a first-year honeymoon for the first term, first-year president. The honeymoon period never began and it ended abruptly. We now know that confirmed that the U.S. officials believe that ISIS committed this act of terror. It was a suicide attack. We know Al Qaeda, and ISIS are now back in Afghanistan. We know that there are a lot of minerals and natural resources in Afghanistan that a lot of countries want. Everything you said, I could agree with you. Kamala Harris is not ready. And it's a good point that this is the best insurance policy so that he won't get impeached. I haven't heard that before. But what choice do we have? Who do we have in the Republican Party that is not an extremist Trumper? Who could we have that will lead our nation back to prosperity? We really, I feel it. We are really in trouble. You know, the political divide coming from science to mask to even warfare. I mean, our military is still by far the number one military might. The trillions we have spent, it only benefited what? Benefited the brokers, the makers of the weapons and grasped from Afghanistan's corrupt government. Mm-hmm. Where did the money go? You know, I mean, we cannot be revisionists. There's always that two parties in the government, the doves and the hawks. One wants to go in and destroy, other wants to rebuild that nation. It's a fine balance. That's what makes our nation great. But you have to pick one and do them, and not half-ass on neither of them.
No. But I would argue that, we are the military is the biggest fighting force in the world. It's stronger than probably all the other countries in the world combined. All of that's fine. But there is absence of leadership there, too. When Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin came on TV a few days ago and said, we no longer control the operations in and around Kabul. Where have you been? What have you been doing? How can you just give up? It makes absolutely no sense. The other thing which causes me great heartburn as well is it's been known for a very long time that the financial books of the Defense Department are simply unauditable. We don't know what we're spending. We don't know what we're buying. So as good as our military is, it itself is unaccountable and out of control. It needs a very strong executive. The whole brilliance of our American system is the military must report to civilian leadership. Any member of NATO must have that governance in the same regard, okay? And now, speaking of NATO, virtually every one of our NATO allies is hugely unhappy with Mr. Biden because he acted unilaterally here. We had, I don't know how many NATO partners participating with us in Afghanistan, but none of them were consulted about what the U.S. decisions and moves were, and they were all left hanging. What the hell do we do now? And their final troops and citizens were, and their NGOs and all the other things were put at risk. through no fault of their own. The calamity of this thing, it just goes on and on and on. You're patient to listen to me talk, Jimmy, but...
No, it's very sombering. Of course I'll listen to you, Jim. I mean, what else is there left to say? This is a nightmare. This is a rabbit hole, and just gets worse and worse. Any life lost after the pullout is unacceptable. There's no reason this is happening. Mm-hmm. We know now how much we could be trusted. What allies would want to work with us down the road? Who would want to sit there and fight with us anymore?
Well, that's what some of the people in the British Parliament said yesterday. They just cannot believe this. And you asked me the question earlier today, what do our friends in Taiwan have to think about all of this? And
it's funny you bring up Taiwan, because the fall of Afghanistan has brought out a lot of truth tellers, telling the folks in Taiwan, the people that couldn't speak up before, because the Taiwan's government is totalitarian. They, like I said before, they close radio stations, they close TV stations, they censor everyone. They're worse than the 60p now, because they want to ensure they're in power. But they've always hedged their bets all on the U.S. They've always lied to their people and said that if there's war, they can keep provoking China because U.S. and Taiwan stand together. What they fail to understand is that we have our nation's sovereignty and interests at best. Mm-hmm. We're not going to send American lives over there to fight another war for someone else. Taiwan's military force, they're young folks. They're not doing drills. They're not being conscripted. There's no training. They cannot just spin it all on the U.S. because we're not going to do that. But the people that are paid by DPP, by the political party, by the ruler in Taiwan, they're being paid to spin it. They've been spinning it for a long time. This should be a wake-up call. No country should depend on another country completely to defend themselves, especially if you're provoking somebody that you cannot beat. When you're Taiwan and you're sitting there trying to provoke China, when we allow you, we put Taiwan on a leash. We let them do a few things so we can negotiate with China. But in the end, we're not going to send any more boys over there to fight another war. This is not going to happen, especially after what happened in Afghanistan.
Right. And there's so many parallels to what in Afghanistan to what happened in Vietnam. We were supporting a force that wasn't willing or able to fight strongly for itself. We put our faith in other people. What really happened is we wanted to be there more than they wanted us there in both places. And
absolutely, they call Afghanistan the empire's graveyard, right? Russian business art couldn't get there. We couldn't do it. British couldn't do it. But in the end, we cannot keep trying to impose our democracy and our Western living on. I mean, that's a culture that have thousands of years of history, just like what we're trying to control the narrative on China or maybe Korea. Or no, to say that at this day and age, we're supposed to be respectful of other people's heritage and culture. We travel, but why can't our government reflect the same way we are? This is, 30, 40 years ago, there are a lot of things we say that will be considered wrong or racist or ignorant. Now we know. There are also things that we didn't know any better, but now we do. But yet, why is our leader still using a stick and a carrot the same way? Either you listen or we attack or we give you funding. Why can't we leave people alone in a way? I mean,
we should leave people alone. If Afghanistan wants to behave like the Afghanis have behaved since the 6th century, let them be. What we care about is we don't want to have terrorists to have a safe haven there, which means that if we find in our own national self-interest that we find terrorists there, it seems to me relatively simple. You go in and bomb the shit out of them, and you take care of business and then come home.
We did do that. We did. But what happened was they hid in the mountains and in the tunnels. I mean, the main reason we went is because they harbored Al-Qaeda and ISIS and Osama bin Laden. But after we found Osama and captured him and put him to justice is served. And why did we continue to stay there? And We trained these Mujahideen fighters to fight against Russians. We trained them. We built the books. We built the whole system. And now we're the Russians. CIA, we literally dug our own grave.
Yeah. And there's so many pieces to that story, Jimmy, and it's so parallel to what happened in Iraq. George W. Bush picked al-Maliki. Maliki, I guess they pronounce his name. He's a Shia. No wonder he has a link with Iran. He spent 20 years in Tehran.
Yeah.
Gee, guess what you got? The same thing he picked Karzai. He picked the other guy who abandoned his whole country, took $150 million and went to Dubai. What is going on here? And back to the unaccountable, part of the corruption in Afghanistan is because we financed the corruption. We just showered the place with money. No accountability. What are we getting for the money? We just spent the money. It's just beyond belief.
This is across 4 administrations, 4 presidents. Yeah. And where does the buck stop? Good Lord, this is so sombering. And
when Colin Powell and Norman Schwarzkopf for Bush 41 went into Kuwait to throw Saddam's adventurism out of Kuwait, Colin Powell had 4 pieces to his doctrine. Number 1, you have to have a clear and present danger. Number 2, you have to have overwhelming public support. Number 3, you have to have overwhelming force. And number 4, you must have a clear, quick exit. We had none of those things in Afghanistan. None, nor Iraq.
You're right. Colin Powell, somebody we respect. He, no matter who he served, he made the right decisions. He wasn't just a political puppet. Jim, we have to go, but we need to revisit next week. We want to see where it goes after a week.
See where it goes. We learn more every day. It's not happy what we learn, but we do learn more every day. But every day the news gets worse. It's like you think it can't get any worse. We should bottom out and start turning around, but it does get worse. One of the statistics I heard yesterday just astounded me. The Biden administration was very proud to say that in the last several days, they have airlifted something like 80,000 people out of there. Only 4,000 of them were Americans. 5% of the people we're taking out of there are Americans, and that's less than half of the Americans that they estimate are there. They really don't know. And many of the Americans, look, I don't know this for a fact, but I can surmise it. Many of the Americans simply can't get to the airport because Afghanistan is a fairly large country. And right now, the internal transportation systems, if you're in Helmand Province as an American, how the hell do you get from Helmand Province into Kabul so that you can get out of there? I don't know. I don't know.
Could you imagine American lives being lost, civilians being left behind by their country, by their military? I cannot imagine if this happening. I hope they come up with a plan because it's, you know what? There is no shame. Got to get back there. Got to go back there and restore order. The short-term relief is in exchange of how many more lives, how many more of our service.
If I were Biden right now, or I shouldn't say because I would never, ever be him, but if I were in...
if you were making a decision, if you were the one making the decision,
I would give my commanders 24 hours to come up with a plan on how you parachute into Kabul, you retake Bagram Air Force Base, you reestablish control, and you reestablish the ability to go round up all the Americans, and you tell the Taliban, whatever deal you think we had is over.
Yep.
We are staying.
Because you attacked us.
You attacked us. And you haven't been true to your word, and we're going to show you who's boss all over again. And if you don't like it, just watch what we do next, okay? And that's going to set up all kinds of firestorms, all these other kind of crap. things. But we absolutely have to restore our strength.
There is no other way. The other way doesn't work. 20 years. You cannot make deals with folks that don't want you there. Either you go all the way with your stick, or you don't do it at all.
Right. And there's all kinds of ripple effects that go from it. We got to reestablish redefine our relationship with Pakistan. Pakistan is a sieve. We can go on and on and on, but it is a very dangerous neighborhood. It is like going to Long Island and saying, okay, MS-13, you win. The placid suburbs are now no longer safe. You win, and we're taking people out. That's what.
But then you don't. The police and the military just leaves, and the MS-13 comes over and starts killing everyone.
Yeah. So anyway,
thank you, Jim.
To be continued. It's not going away, Jimmy. This problem will be sitting here waiting for us next week. But thank you for bringing it up.
Please let us all call for prayers for our troops, for the men and women that are stuck there, and for the civilians, and Afghanistan civilians that are innocent. May God have mercy. This is a somber day. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Jimmy. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.